The derelict ship smelled like burnt wire and old death. Ward Calloway moved through the dark corridor with a hand torch and a salvage pack, stepping over frozen debris that had once been someone's cargo. The cold was not the kind that just sat on your skin. It went through you. It made your teeth feel loose. The Vaerathi transport had been drifting for 6 days before Orath Station's sensors caught it. No crew signals, no distress beacon, just a dead ship floating into the colony's orbital lane like a bad memory. Ward's salvage team had been sent to check it, strip anything useful, and flag the rest. His crewmate Greel was 2 corridors behind him, cataloging crates with a scanner and complaining about the smell. Greel always complained. Ward had stopped listening sometime in the 3rd year of working together. The hold at the end of the corridor was sealed. The door had warped in the cold, bent just enough that it wouldn't open all the way. Ward got down on one knee, hooked his fingers into the gap, and pulled. The metal groaned. The door gave. He pushed through. The hold was larger than expected. Shelves along the walls. Most of the cargo was ore, raw, unprocessed, heavy, nothing unusual, nothing worth writing home about. He almost turned around. He almost did. But there was a light. Faint, pale, coming from a low shelf in the back corner, behind a collapsed rack of metal containers. Ward crossed the hold, moved the rack aside with effort, and found it. An egg. It was the size of a large crate, surface a deep charcoal gray with faint cracks running through it. The cracks were glowing, pale gold, like something was still burning inside, very faintly, very slowly. A small puddle of bioluminescent fluid had pooled beneath it where the shell had split along one side. Ward had seen Vaerathi eggs in training images. They were always depicted as perfect, heavy, unbreakable, ancient things. This one was cracked. This one was leaking. This one had been sitting in vacuum cold for 6 days. He put his bare hand against the shell. It was still warm, barely, the way a thing is warm when it's almost done being warm. His radio clicked, Greel's voice. Ward, scanner's done, nothing worth much. You find anything back there? Ward looked at the egg for a long moment. No, he said, nothing, give me 10 minutes. He set his pack down. He took out the field-grade bioadhesive, the kind used for sealing suit tears and patching wounds when nothing else was available. He sealed the crack. It wasn't a proper fix. He knew that. He sealed it anyway. Then he stripped off his thermal underlayer down to just his base suit, and he wrapped the egg as well as he could manage. He could not carry it alone. It was too heavy. He used the emergency cargo sling from his pack, looped it under the egg, and dragged it to the door. It took 20 minutes. He was sweating and shaking by the time he got it through. Greel found him in the corridor. There was a long silence. Ward, Greel said, that is a Vaerathi egg. Yes, it is cracked. Yes, it is probably dead. It's warm. Another silence. Greel's 4 arms folded across his chest. The regulations say. I know what they say. Ward, help me get it to the shuttle. Greel helped. He complained the entire way. Ward did not listen. The trip back to Orath Station was 14 hours. Ward held the egg the entire time, pressed against his body for warmth, his back against the shuttle wall and his legs braced on the floor. He had no thermal underlayer. The cold crept in slowly and without mercy. His hands went numb. His arms ached. He did not put the egg down. Greel covered him with every spare piece of cloth on the shuttle and did not say another word about regulations. In the medbay at Orath Station, Ward built an incubation chamber out of a mining heating coil, 2 portable med units set to maximum thermal output, and a sealed cargo container with the seams stripped and packed with insulating foam. It was ugly. It was not even slightly scientific. The station medic looked at it, looked at Ward, and left the room without speaking. Ward stayed awake for 38 hours. On the 39th hour, the egg moved. Not much, a small shudder, then a sound low, deep, something between a crack and a hum. The shell split cleanly along the top. A head came through first, then a neck. then the rest, slow and wet and struggling. The hatchling was the size of a large dog. Its scales were dark, almost black, with that same faint gold running through them like veins. Its eyes, when they opened, were amber. It looked at Ward. Then it opened its small mouth and breathed. A thin stream of pale gold flame, no longer than Ward's forearm, curled into the air and touched his arm just below the sleeve. It burned, not badly, but enough to scar. Ward laughed. He didn't plan to. It just came out of him, quiet and exhausted and real. The hatchling kept looking at him. The amber eyes did not blink. Ward looked at the side of the broken cargo crate the egg had been resting against on the shelf. There was text printed on it in Vaerathi script. He couldn't read it. He didn't know the language, but the first word had been transliterated once into common script on an information tag underneath, and it read, Sorath. He didn't know what it meant. He thought it sounded like a name. Sorath, he said. The hatchling's head tilted, very slightly. Ward sat back against the wall of the medbay, arms stinging, too tired to stand, and looked at the small dragon who was looking back at him. Okay, he said, what do we do now? Sorath made a small sound, low, warm, like an answer that did not need words. Nobody on Orath's station knew what to do with a dragon. That was fine. Ward didn't either. He figured it out the same way he figured out most things, slowly, badly, and by refusing to stop. In the first month, Sorath ate Ward's boot, then a section of the wall panel, then 3 weeks of ration supplies. The station medic, a quiet woman named Dr. Fenn, found Ward hunched over a cracked data terminal at 2 in the morning, reading everything ever written about Vaerathi dietary needs in any language he could find a translation for. There wasn't much. The Vaerathi didn't share their biology with anyone. Ward made his best guesses. He got it wrong several times. Sorath got sick twice, recovered both times, and kept eating things he wasn't supposed to eat. By the end of the first year, Sorath was the size of a horse. Ward's quarters had been quietly upgraded to a storage bay at the edge of the station. The colony administrator looked the other way mostly because Ward kept submitting his salvage reports on time and nobody else wanted to live next to the ore processors. By year 3, Sorath was bigger than the storage bay door. Ward knocked out a wall section. The administrator found out. There was a conversation. Ward explained the situation calmly and then offered to pay for the wall. The administrator stared at the dragon, who was watching the conversation with amber eyes, and agreed. Greel became the unofficial supply chain. He never said yes. He simply showed up with processed mineral compounds on a cargo dolly once a week and left without making eye contact with either of them. Ward talked to Sorath constantly. This was partly because Ward had always been the kind of person who talked too much when he was tired or anxious, and raising a dragon made him both. But it was also deliberate. He narrated everything. He explained what he was doing and why. He read aloud from whatever was on his data terminal. He described the salvage runs in detail when he came back, sitting on the floor of the storage bay while Sorath listened. He did not know if Sorath understood any of it. He kept talking anyway. In year 4, the colony found out in full. There had been rumors. People on stations like Orath talked, but the official discovery happened when Sorath got loose during the annual equipment inspection and walked into the main corridor. He was calm. He was curious. He had simply pushed the bay door open because he wanted to see where Ward had gone. The child who nearly fell was named Rella. She was 5 years old, running from her mother, not watching where she was going. She hit the floor hard and was sliding toward the open, grating at the corridor's edge when a wing the size of a sail came down and stopped her. Sorath held her there, very still, until her mother reached her. Then he lifted his wing and stepped back. The colony held a meeting. Several adults spoke loudly about safety and protocol and the regulations around large fauna. An older man named Bertus said that the dragon had saved the girl and that anyone who wanted to vote against that could explain their reasoning to him personally. The vote went in Ward's favor, barely. Ward bought everyone drinks. He couldn't really afford to. He did it anyway. Year 7 was the year Sorath spoke. Not sounds, not rumbles. Words, clear and correct in the colony's common tongue, slightly rough at the edges, like someone who had learned a language from listening rather than being taught. His first full sentence was, "You smell like worry, stop it." Ward had been sitting across from him, running through a complicated salvage contract that was not going well. He stared at Sorath for a long time, then he put the contract down. "How long have you been able to do that?" he asked. Sorath tilted his head. "A while." "Why didn't you say something earlier?" A pause. "I was listening." They stayed up that entire night talking. Ward did most of the talking. Sorath asked questions, careful, specific questions, the kind that showed he had been paying attention to everything for years and had simply been waiting for the right moment to ask. In year 10, Sorath asked Ward one question and never asked it again. They were outside the station on the maintenance platform, the kind of place where you could see the stars clearly through the observation field. Sorath was too large for most of the station's interior by then. He said very quietly, "Do you regret it?" Ward didn't answer for a moment, not because he didn't know, but because the answer felt too simple for the size of the question. "No," he said. "You nearly died in the cold." "I know. You lost 3 months of pay replacing the wall." "The wall was fine." "Ward." "Sorath." Sorath looked at him. The amber eyes had not changed. They were the same eyes that had opened for the first time and looked at him in the medbay 20 years ago, and they were also completely different. Ancient, deep, something that had been watching the world carefully for a long time and had made conclusions Ward would never fully know. He did not ask again. In year 15, a conclave diplomatic vessel appeared on Orath Station's long-range sensors. It was broadcasting on the Vairathi frequency. Ward found out from the comm operator and went directly to the maintenance platform. Sorath was already there. He had been there for an hour, facing the direction the signal was coming from. He was the size of a small frigate. His scales had gone from near black to a deep iron grey, and the gold in them burned brighter than it had when he was small. Ward stood next to him. The cold didn't bother him much anymore. "They're coming," Ward said. "Yes," Sorath said. A long quiet. "We knew this was coming," Ward said. "Yes. You ready?" Sorath exhaled slowly. The breath came out as a low flame, pale gold, dissolving into the dark. It was the same color as the first breath. It had always been the same color. "Are you?" Sorath said. Ward put his hands in his jacket pockets. He thought about the egg in the cold hold, and the 38 hours awake, and the boot that got eaten, and the wall he paid for, and the question that only got asked once. "Yeah," he said, "I think so." 3 ships came. They sent 3, as if one might not be enough. The first carried a Vairathi representative named Geth, who moved through Orath Station's corridors like the walls had personally offended him. He wore the grey and gold robes of the Vairathi diplomatic house and had not spoken to Ward directly since arriving, preferring to address the colonial administrator instead, as though Ward were furniture that happened to be standing in the room. The second ship carried a conclave legal team, 5 of them, different species, all with the same expression, careful, neutral, and tired in the way people are tired when their job is to stand between 2 things that want to pull in opposite directions. The third ship carried Director Holt. Orath Station's colonial administrator had filed a report 18 months ago when Sorath's existence had become officially known to the conclave. Ward had not been told. He found this out in the first meeting from the conclave lawyers who cited the report as part of the official record. He had looked at Holt across the table. Holt had looked at his own hands. The meetings began. Geth's position was simple. Sorath was Vairathi. He was the property and responsibility of the Vairathi people. The circumstances of his survival were irregular but not legally relevant. He would be transferred to Vaerathi custody, and that would be the end of it. The conclave lawyer's position was more complicated. Under colonial salvage law, a sentient being recovered from a derelict vessel and sustained by a party for more than 10 years had ambiguous status. There were precedents, not many, none involving a dragon. The legal team was, as one of them put it with painful honesty, exploring the framework. Holt's position was the worst one. He wanted Sorath classified as a colony asset, a diplomatic and economic resource. He had already drafted proposals. Ward had read one of them. He had put it down before he finished it because he did not want to say anything in that room that could not be unsaid. Sorath was not in any of the meetings. He had not been invited. The meetings were about him. He was not considered a participant. On the third day, a woman in a conclave military observer uniform slid a folded piece of paper across the table to Ward. She did it so smoothly that no one else noticed. Her name tag said Osai. Ward opened the paper under the table. It had a name and a contact code on it, nothing else. The lawyer Ward hired was small, grey, and apparently very expensive. He didn't ask Ward how he was paying. Ward did not explain that he had emptied his savings account, sold his salvage equipment license, and borrowed the rest from Greel, who had said absolutely nothing except, "Pay me back when you can." The lawyer's argument was not emotional, it was procedural. Under conclave law, a sentient being who was the subject of legal proceedings but not classified as a legal party was entitled to designate an advocate of their own choosing. The designation had to come from the being themselves. It had to be made in the presence of all parties. Nobody had asked Sorath who he wanted. The conclave legal team went quiet when this was raised. Geth started to object. The lead conclave lawyer held up one hand and said, very quietly, that the point was procedurally valid and they were obligated to follow it. They brought in a communication relay so Sorath could hear and be heard from the maintenance platform outside. The station was not built for a dragon of his size. He had never fit inside any of its official spaces. The question was simple. Sorath, under conclave law, you are entitled to designate an advocate. Who do you choose? The relay was silent for a moment. Then Sorath said Ward's name. No title, no formal designation, just the name. The way you say the name of someone who is the answer to a question before the question is even finished. The room was very quiet after that. Geth recovered first. He said it did not matter. The bond claim was biologically impossible. The Vaerathi bonding reflex required specific chemical and biological conditions that humans did not meet. Whatever Sorath believed he felt was an artifact of imprinting, of being raised in isolation from his own kind. It was not a bond, it was a pattern, and patterns could be corrected. Ward's lawyer started to respond. Ward put a hand on his arm. Ward said, "Can I ask one question?" The lead conclave lawyer nodded. Ward said, "Has anyone asked Sorath what he wants?" Another silence, longer this time. Sorath's voice came through the relay again, unprompted. He said, "I know what I am, I also know who I am. These are not the same question." No one in the room had a procedure for that. The proceedings were suspended pending further conclave review. It would take 4 more years to reach a resolution. 4 years of filings and counter-filings and consultations, and the particular grinding slowness of institutions that were not designed to handle things they had never seen before. That night Ward brought food to the platform. 2 tons of mineral compound and a crate of the protein supplements Sorath had finally stopped complaining about. He sat on the edge of the platform with his legs hanging over and ate a ration bar while Sorath ate beside him. Sorath said, "They will try to separate us." Ward said, "They can try. I will not allow it." "Neither will I, but let's do the legal part first." Sorath made the sound Ward had learned to identify as his version of a laugh. It sounded like boulders rolling downhill, but with a warmth underneath it. Ward finished the ration bar and looked out at the stars. 4 more years, he'd waited 15 already, 4 was nothing. The planet looked like the inside of a forge. Ward pressed his face against the shuttle viewport and watched Draventh Prime grow from a dark spot to a full-world black rock. Slow rivers of magma, a sky the color of an old bruise lit orange from below, clouds that were not water, mountains that were not mountains, but ancient dragon structures built in a time before the conclave existed. The whole world seemed to glow from the inside. It was the most beautiful and most hostile place he had ever seen. The compromise that had ended 4 years of legal deadlock was not a victory for anyone. It was a ceasefire. Sorath would travel to Draventh Prime voluntarily. He would appear before the Vaerasi High Council. He would undergo the naming rite, the ceremony that recognized a Vaerasi as a full adult member of the species. After the rite, he would be free to determine his own path. No custody transfer, no forced severance. Ward would accompany him as designated advocate. The Vaerasi had agreed to this through what Ward imagined were clenched teeth. He was the first human to set foot on Draventh Prime. The Conclave observers had noted this in their records as historically significant. Ward had noted it as terrifying. The landing platform was enormous. It had to be, for the delegation of Elder Vaerasi waiting on it. They were massive beings, each one larger than Sorath, with scales that had gone deep silver or dark red with age. They stood in a line and they watched the shuttle land with the particular stillness of things that have been alive for a very long time and have learned to conserve their reactions. Ward walked down the ramp behind Sorath. None of the elders looked at him. He might as well have been a piece of luggage. High Speaker Varath was at the center of the line, the oldest, the largest. His scales were the color of dark iron, and each one seemed carved rather than grown. He looked at Sorath for a long time without speaking, and something moved through his expression that Ward couldn't read. Then he spoke in the ancient Vaerathi tongue, and the translation relay in Ward's ear gave him a flat, mechanical version of it. The welcome was not warm, it was formal, correct, the kind of words that are said because ritual requires them. Ward was assigned a waiting area just outside the council chamber, a small room of black stone with one bench, no window, a guard who did not speak and did not leave. Ward sat on the bench and put his bag between his feet and waited. He had done a lot of waiting in the last 20 years. He was good at it. Through the wall, he could hear nothing. Inside, the rite began. High Speaker Varath spoke the opening words in the ancient tongue, words that had not changed in thousands of years, words that were spoken over every Vaerathi at the threshold of adulthood. He spoke them slowly, giving the young one time to absorb them, expecting silence, perhaps awe. Sorath answered, in the ancient tongue, every word correct, every pause in the right place, every inflection carrying the weight the old language required. The High Speaker stopped. Sorath waited. Then Varath spoke the second passage. This one was older, rarely used even by elders who had studied their whole lives. It was a test, a way of measuring. Almost no young Vaerathi could answer it without years of formal instruction. Sorath answered that too. The High Speaker went silent for a long time. There was no teacher who had taught him. There was no school, no elder, no formal instruction. Ward had mentioned once, casually, in year 12, sitting on the maintenance platform, that there were some Vaerathi text fragments in the public conclave archive, poor quality scans from before the scattering, and that Ward had tried to read them, but the script was too complex. Sorath had not said anything about that. He had simply been quiet, the way he was quiet when he was paying attention to something important. He had spent 8 years with those fragments, alone, rebuilding the language piece by piece from broken records and incomplete translations in the dark of the maintenance bay while Ward slept. Sorath completed the rite himself. He spoke every passage, every response, every closing word in the correct order, not from instruction, from memory, from the years of teaching himself the voice of a people he had never met. When the chamber doors opened, Ward stood up fast. Sorath came out. He looked the same as always, the deep iron-gray scales, the gold veins, the amber eyes. But there was something about the way he held himself that was different, not bigger, just more settled, like a door that had finally been closed properly. Ward said, "How'd it go?" Sorath came to him and lowered himself to sit beside the stone bench, which was too small to be useful to either of them. "I know all the old words now," he said. Ward looked at him for a moment, "And yet," he said. Sorath looked back, "And yet," he agreed. There was no triumph in it. There was no bitterness either. It was simply a fact about the world, held between them the way they held most things, without drama, without pretense. Below the platform, a river of magma moved slowly through the black rock, pulling orange light across everything. The sky was amber and permanent and vast. Ward sat on the inadequate bench, and Sorath sat beside him, and they watched the ancient world burn quietly in the dark. The law of severance was older than the conclave. High Speaker Varath had invoked it the morning after the naming rite, in a written submission to the conclave observers that was formal and precise and had clearly been prepared well in advance. The law was simple in theory. Any Vaerathi bond formed under conditions of developmental incompetence, meaning the young dragon had been too immature to understand what was happening, could be reviewed by the High Council and formally severed if the Council determined the bond was harmful to the Vaerathi's development as a member of their species. Ward's lawyer read the submission twice and then sat very still for a while. Then he said, "The law is real, it has precedent. It has never been applied to a bond with an alien species, but the text does not exclude it." A pause. "We will have to argue the hearing." The hearing was held in the full council chamber. Vaerathi elders in a half-circle, conclave observers along the wall. Ward sat in the center of the room on a chair that had clearly been brought in from somewhere else, because nothing in the chamber was built to human scale. Sorath was present, not inside. The doors weren't wide enough, but a relay channel was open. His voice could enter the room. The room could not hold the rest of him. The High Speaker laid out the case carefully. He was not cruel about it. He was honest, which was almost worse. He said, Ward Calloway had found the egg in ignorance. He had acted without knowledge of Vaerathi bonding biology, without understanding what the first breath meant, without consent from any Vaerathi authority. The bond was an accident. A well-intentioned accident, perhaps, but an accident all the same. Sorath had grown up in isolation from his own kind, shaped entirely by a human colony, and the bond that had formed was a product of that isolation. Not a true bond, a dependency, and dependencies could be treated. Then he said the thing that landed hardest: ignorance is not love, it is an accident wearing love's face. The conclave observers wrote notes. Ward looked at the wall across from him and breathed slowly. His lawyer began the response. Ward stopped him with a hand on the arm. He reached into his bag and brought out a data drive. He plugged it into the relay terminal in front of him. He said, "I'd like to enter a log into the record." It was 20 years of daily entries, not a summary, the full record. He had kept it from the first night, originally because the medic had told him to document everything for liability reasons, and then because the habit had formed and he had never broken it. It was not dramatic. It was mostly mundane: what Sorath ate, what he said, what questions he asked, what Ward had explained badly and had to re-explain. Notes from the nights. Sorath had been sick, and Ward had sat beside him unable to do much but stay. Records of conversations that had lasted until the station's lights cycled from night to morning. One entry from Year 7 read, "He asked if I regret it. I don't know how to explain to a dragon that the question doesn't make sense." The conclave observers read in silence. The elders on the council read in silence. The High Speaker read it, and his face was very still. Then Varath delivered his closing argument. He looked at Ward directly, perhaps for the first time since arriving at Orath Station 4 years ago. He said, "You did not know what you were doing. You cannot claim a bond you did not understand." Sorath spoke through the relay. He did not address Varath, he addressed the room. He said that, in the ancient Vaerathi tongue, the word for the bond between a Vaerathi and their bonded was Vithar. No clean translation existed in the common tongue. The closest was, the one who chose to stay when they did not have to. He said he had read every fragment of Vaerathi history that survived the scattering, not just the rites, the histories, the old accounts of how bonds had formed across thousands of years. In every case, the bonded had not understood what they were doing. None of them had. The circumstances were always too fast, too instinctive, too raw for understanding to come first. He said the bond is not formed by knowledge, it is formed by the choice. Ward Calloway chose to stay, in the cold, with no knowledge, no instruction, no reason that the rest of the galaxy would have recognized as sufficient. He chose to stay, that is the word, that is the whole thing. The room was very quiet. The law of severance was denied. The bond was recognized as valid under Vaerathi tradition and conclave law simultaneously. The conclave observers entered it into the official record in 3 languages. Ward signed where they told him to sign. He spelled his own surname wrong on the first attempt. Sorath corrected him through the relay. Someone in the observers section made a sound that might have been a laugh. As the hearing cleared, High Speaker Varath stopped in front of Ward. He looked at him for a long time. Then he said quietly in the common tongue, "You should not have survived the exposure. In the wreck, the cold, the hours, you should not have survived it." Ward said, "Yeah, I know. Why did you not put the egg down?" Ward thought about it. He gave the honest answer, "I didn't want to." Varath was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is a Vaerathi answer." He walked away. Ward stood there alone in the emptied chamber, his bag at his feet, the data drive still in the terminal. Outside, through the wall, he could hear Sorath breathing. Before they left, High Speaker Varath asked to speak with Ward alone. Ward had not expected this. He had expected to be escorted to his shuttle, perhaps with formal politeness, perhaps without it, and sent back toward the stars with a document and a story he would be telling for the rest of his life. He had not expected to be led to a small room of black stone on the far side of the council chamber, where a fire burned in a shallow basin, and the High Speaker sat and looked older than anything Ward had ever sat across from. Varath said, "Tell me about the ship." Ward told him. He described it the way he always did when he described it honestly, not as a heroic story, but as a salvage run that smelled like burnt wire and old death, and a hold at the end of a corridor, and a light that was almost gone. He described the crack in the shell, and the bioadhesive, and the thermal underlayer, and the 14 hours in the cold. He did not leave anything out. He did not add anything in. Varath listened, without moving. When Ward was done, the High Speaker was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The ship, we did not know it had survived the scattering. We believed all eggs aboard were lost." He paused. "We mourned them." Ward said nothing. "Sorath was my grandson's egg," Varath said. "My grandson died in the scattering. The egg was listed as lost with the ship. We held the mourning rites 20 years ago." Ward looked at the fire in the basin. He did not know what to say. He found he did not need to say anything. Varath was not telling him this as an accusation. He was telling him the way someone tells a thing that has been carried alone for a long time. Ward nodded once. Varath nodded back. They did not speak again after that. They did not need to. The shuttle lifted from Draventh Prime's landing platform as the amber sky was beginning to darken. Sorath was already in open air, waiting. He was the size of a warship now, full wingspan hundreds of meters, scales deep gray and gold, enormous and quiet, and perfectly still as the shuttle cleared the platform and rose to meet him. Ward watched him through the viewport. He could have flown ahead. He was faster than the shuttle by a significant margin, and everyone in the conclave knew it. He had the range and the endurance to cross half the system on his own. He was recognized now, free, his status settled in 3 legal frameworks simultaneously. He could go anywhere. He flew alongside the shuttle, wingtip to hull, close enough that Ward could see the gold in his scales, catch the light of Draventh Prime's volcanic sky as they left it behind. This was how they had always done it, side by side. Ward set the autopilot and leaned back in the pilot's seat. He was in his early 50s now. His knees hurt on cold days. His hair had gone gray at the edges sometime in year 16, and he had not paid attention to it since. The scar on his forearm from the first breath had faded to a thin silver line that he sometimes forgot was there until someone asked about it. He was tired in the way that a good tired feels, the kind that comes from something finished, not something lost. He fell asleep somewhere past Draventh Prime's outer moons, in the deep black between one star and the next. Zorath flew alongside the shuttle and watched the trajectory and made small corrections when the autopilot drifted. He checked the hull temperature as they passed through a debris field near the outer belt and guided the shuttle clear without waking Ward. He had been doing this for years. Ward never asked him to. He never said he did. It was simply a thing that happened, the way most of the important things between them simply happened, without announcement. The Vairasi High Council had sent a message 3 days before the hearing ended. Quiet, unofficial. They wanted to know if Zorath would consider becoming a speaker, a representative of the Vairasi people in conclave affairs, the last of his generation. The first bonded Vairasi in recorded history to share a bond with a human. A bridge, they called him. He was thinking about it. He had not told Ward yet. He would. There was time. There was, for the first time in 20 years, a sense that there was time for things, that the ground was stable enough to stand on, that the horizon was not about to change into something requiring emergency response. The shuttle drifted on through the dark. Ward slept. Zorath kept pace beside it, wings spread in the nothing, scales quiet in the starlight. There was a word in the ancient Vairasi tongue. He had told it to the council chamber, and he meant every syllable of it. The one who chose to stay when they did not have to, that was the word, that was the definition. But there was a second part of the word that translation always lost. In the original, Vithar did not only mean the bonded, it meant both of them, the one who stayed and the one who had given them reason to. Two things, one word. Ward woke when the autopilot chimed for a course correction. He looked out the viewport, half asleep, checking reflex. Zorath was there, right beside the hull, close and steady, amber eyes forward and wings settled in the long glide that meant he was comfortable. Ward checked the course correction. It was already done. He hadn't needed to wake up at all. He looked out at Zorath for a moment. Then he leaned the seat back, closed his eyes, and went back to sleep.